Welcome to the Thursday Atelier at Secret Garden Mercantile and Country Brocante. Today's project will be a lovely fall decoupage, and we'll also be making a recycled milk can with stamps from IOD. Let's get started. Okay, my plan is to use this wood. It's an IOD wood gallery blank. It's a 12 by 16 inch, and they're really nicely sanded wood blanks all ready to go. It's actually pretty thick and well built, as you can see from the back on the frame. So I love these blanks. Anyway, this one I'm going to be using, and my plan is to use it as a backing for a decoupage, a fall decoupage print, to go kind of as the background for my other decor pieces that I'm going to be creating. So this is the print that I decided to use. It's a Decoupage Queen print, and it's called Cottage Pumpkin. It's beautiful, and this one is a particularly large one. They have it in smaller versions also, and I have it, I hope I have it on the website, but I'll be getting more very soon. So it should be coming any day, actually, I would think. So it was a pre-order from Decoupage Queen because they print them. So and they're actually printed in Italy, so they have to get them from overseas. So so I'm just going to go ahead and put that aside for right now and paint this wood gallery blank with my old favorite, the porch swing color from Amy Howard at Home One Step Paint. And I'm just going to put some out here on my board and start painting. Okay, now I'm ready to apply my decoupage matte medium. It's Paint Couture, and I'm going to use this to prepare my wood board for the decoupage paper. To go ahead and lay the first part of my decoupage paper right on the board and try to position it as straight as I can. I want it a little over the top of the board because it needs to, it's a little longer than the board, but I want to make sure that it's straight across as much as I can. Hope it's not quite centered properly. And I want to make sure that I have it. This is the tricky part to get it started. And I want to make sure that I have it as straight as I can on my board also. I can kind of see the paper is kind of transparent or translucent, so I can kind of see where I am on both sides of it. Let's see how much overlap, how much spacing I have on either side of it. Making sure that that's pretty flat as much as I can without a whole lot of wrinkles is the idea here. I could have probably done it half at a time, and that would have been smarter, but that's okay. I'm gonna try to do this. Oh. A few less wrinkles would be good. The decoupage paper tends to stretch a little bit as it gets moist from the medium, so you want to make sure that you're getting it down with as few wrinkles as possible on it. And at least at first here, like I'm doing, you can pull it up and down a little bit to make sure that you've got a pretty wrinkle-free surface. So that's the good news there. So I think I've got a pretty good flat surface now, and I'm just going to grab my my brayer for it. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm just going to lightly use my brayer to make sure that my decoupage paper is well adhered to the surface of the board, and just move it around on it a little bit just to make sure that I've got a good seal with it. It looks like I'm on here pretty straight, enough that the eye won't be able to tell, I don't think, if it's a little crooked, so it looks pretty good. And I don't see any obvious wrinkles at this point. Okay, perfect. All right, the next step is to go ahead and put the top coat on it. And this, in this case, you want to make sure to use light strokes and try not to go over it again and again, because you could tear your paper. And I think I only have one sheet of this size paper right now. I think I ordered more, but I wanted to try this one. So, so I don't want to ruin it if I can help it. Okay, my decoupage paper is pretty dry now, and I'm sorry I was off camera for a second there and didn't realize it, but I'm going to go ahead and use this little nail file, manicure file of some kind that I get off, I get these in bulk on Amazon, and they work wonderfully for this. I'm just going to trim off the excess paper. As you can see now, the paper does not cover my entire board, so that's why I wanted to get it pretty well centered on here. But it's okay, because I'm going to be using some trim pieces that I'm going to make from molds. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that next. But meanwhile, I'm just going to start trimming away. I'm going to start sanding away, I should say, at this, at the edge of the board. And I do it kind of in an angle to the edge of the board. And I always pull away from my decoupage print. I'm going away from the print as I'm doing it. And then once you get it started, the paper actually pulls right away from it. It just kind of tears away. So it's really kind of nifty how this works. Okay, I've got my decoupage board already, and I am going to work on my trim pieces now for the piece. And I actually have chosen, this is kind of interesting because this is the primitive mold from IOD, and it came out quite some time ago, but I do have these in stock at Secret Garden Mercantile still. And it's a wonderful mold with all kinds of flowers, birds, little hearts and foliage, all kinds of things. It actually has a couple little jumping rabbits too, so in the springtime that's really a nice attribute. But what I'm going to use from this is this little trim piece on the edge. And the reason why I chose this is because I want it to be somewhat innocuous. I don't want it to stand out too much, but I just want it to be a little bit of trim around the edge to cover those areas that are because of the decoupage, the decoupage paper not being quite the size of the board. And I could have done something with blending paints and that kind of thing, but I decided that this would be kind of a fun way to do it, because then I can do whatever I want with it. I'm thinking of maybe some gilding or some glaze on that little frame piece. So the other thing I could have done is used the IOD frame molds, and there's all different ones, or excuse me, the trimming molds, the trimmings, and there's trimmings 1, 2, 3, 4, I think now. But anyway, but those are a little thicker, and most of them. And I just thought, you know, this one might have gone pretty well too. But I just wanted to try this little teensy one. And so we'll see how it goes. I chose to use the air dry clay with it. So that'll be the other thing that'll be interesting instead of resin. And this is the IOD air dry clay. It's wonderful. It comes in this little wrapper and stays really fresh. And what I do with mine is when I get ready to use it, I open it up, cut open the package, and then I use it in the mold, and then I put it in a Ziploc bag, and I usually put a little dampened paper towel with it and store it in the refrigerator, and it lasts a really long time that way. It stays nice and moist. The key thing is not to let it just dry out, because of it, obviously air dry clay is made to harden and be long lasting once it dries. So the other thing that we're going to do here is, in preparation to use our mold with the air dry clay, we're just going to use some of this plain old Argo cornstarch. And so you'll see me using that to just put a little, and this is my little cornstarch brush. It's a little chip brush that I use every time, and I just store it right with the cornstarch to have handy. So I'm just going to put a little bit in here, and the reason why is because I want to make sure that the clay releases easily. And this is a small little mold, so that's particularly important, although all of them, it does help them to release. Other people talk about putting it in the freezer. I've never had to do that, but you know, might help to release some of the more intricate molds as well. So that's another tip that you can certainly try. So I'm just going to take out a little bit of this. Probably isn't going to need too much clay for this, this tiny little mold, but we'll see how much I need in there. I'm just going to kind of roll it, actually, just like you do with Play-Doh, so to make a little snake. And I think I'm going to need at least probably 5 or so pieces of this for my picture, so that's what I'm anticipating. So I'm just going to start pushing it into the mold, and I'm going to start at one end and move to the other end and kind of just keep pushing it. Can you see? Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here, and maybe I can give a close-up. Let's see what that does. I can pull it in here. Yep. So you can see me pushing it right in there with my fingers, and I'm just kind of flattening it as I go. Now there are little borders at the edge. They made these little wonderful little borders, and you can work against those as you're going along. So with your fingers, and you just kind of flatten the clay with your fingers as you go and push it. And I'm also kind of nudging the clay into the mold as I go, as you can see with both fingers here sometimes, and just with my thumb, and that way I don't waste a lot of clay either. So it makes it kind of easier, and again, it's all nice and flat in here, and we'll just keep pushing it out till we get closer to our end here, our other end. And then if there's any areas that aren't filling totally, you want to make sure you're pushing it down into the mold, because otherwise your details in your mold may not show up as well, or there might be a little void in them. So you don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to keep pushing away here, pushing to get as much clay as possible into that mold, nice and firmly into it. And I'm almost to the end. And you'll see how it comes out once I get it all done here. I'm going to make sure I have a good solid end piece here. The other thing with these molds is they're specifically made so that you can put them end to end, and you can cut a little divot in it to make it work too. So I'll show you about that. But we're going to just, okay, now is the moment of truth. We're going to put our mold upside down, and that's the key thing to being able to get these out. So as you can see, I'm putting it upside down, but I'm also tilting it up a little bit and pulling my piece as I go. I'm going to be pulling my piece right out of the mold, and there it is. And it's just a perfect little trim piece. So I'm going to set that one aside for right now, and we're just going to forge ahead here, and I'm going to make some more. So so I think I will probably go off camera for that, and I'll be back. Okay, I've decided to make 6 of these little trims, and I've got them all laid out here. I'll show you in a minute, but I'm going to do the very last one on camera because I wanted to remind you that every time you do one of these, you definitely want to use, even if you've done one in the same mold, you want to use more of the cornstarch. The cornstarch is the key, as far as I'm concerned, to making sure that your clay doesn't stick in the mold. So I had forgotten to mention that at the beginning, so I thought, well, I'll tell you now so that you know. And the other thing I wanted to say is that the wonderful thing about all of this actually is that I'm just getting a little more clay here, so to add to my snake. The wonderful thing about all of this is just consider it as relaxing, I hope, and as play, because you know, people get really nervous and anxious sometimes when they're creating things for the first time, and I don't want you to feel that way. I actually have felt that way quite a bit, and especially when you see some of the beautiful things online that people make. And so it took me actually, I don't know, a couple years of being an IOD stockist before I felt just less anxious, and I just felt like, okay, just go for it, girl. You know, just do some work here with the products and enjoy the process. And at first I was so anxious about, oh, what is it going to turn out to be? What are people going to think of it? All of that. And I realized finally that I had the products, and I think this happens to a lot of people. You know, I bought these products with great ideas based on things I had seen other wonderful creators doing. And then the products, you know, just sat there. And of course I bought them because I was going to be a stockist as well, so I had them in stock. But I opened my own to use, and I didn't even get to using them a lot of the time. So I'm just now actually starting to use more of my own IOD products that I had purchased for my Mercantile. So, you know, this happens to everybody, and we all get kind of nervous about it, and we all have kind of whatever you want to call it, imposter syndrome as creators and artists, or, you know, there's other ways of looking at it. But I will just tell you that it's all an experiment. So every time I sit down here in my little potting shed studio, it's going to be an experiment of how things are going to turn out. I never know how things will turn out. I do the best I can to follow the processes that I have learned, and I would encourage you to do the same, but don't expect perfection. Sometimes actually some of the imperfection makes it more wonderful, and then it also teaches us to be somewhat spontaneous and to look at things differently when we're creating and use that creative process. So I just wanted to share that because all of this is so much fun to do, and I don't want you to miss out on that fun by thinking, oh, I have to do something, you know, set out to do something, and it has to be just like a picture that I saw on Pinterest or on Facebook more, or in the creative tribe. You know, it doesn't have to be like somebody else's. It can be your own creation, and that's what's so wonderful about all of this. And if it gets screwed up or if it doesn't work out, I, you know, look at it as, okay, I really learned a lot from that. That didn't work. So I need to just get in there, and sometimes I have to sleep on it because I find that then I assimilate what happened and I can figure out what went wrong. But by the next day, a lot of times I'm able then to go back in and really do it in a different way that works. And that's so exciting and refreshing when that happens. So just wanted to share that with you as well, that we all have that. I'm a beginner in many ways at all of this, and so I'm just sharing with you what I have learned so far, and I'm hoping that as we go along, I'll learn a lot too from doing these sessions. So that's what's fun for me, is sharing and learning right along with you. Okay, so I have this all set and ready to go. So again, we're going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to really flex it back here, and I'm just going to let it kind of come of its own volition out of the mold here, and I'm not going to pull hard on like that, it broke. So, but that's okay, because I'm actually going to need to break a couple of these probably in order to use them on my piece. So I'm going to stick this kind of back together here with my fingers, but I'm not expecting total perfection with it. We're just going to, and I've got all of these now kind of lined up here, and I've got 6 of them. So I'm going to go on to the next step. So okay, I just also wanted to say that today is a gorgeous fall day here in the Pacific Northwest. It's one of those rare days where we actually have sunshine in the fall instead of rain. It's nice and cool and crisp, and the sun is at that special slant that it takes at this time of the year, and it's just a delight to be out here in my little potting shed studio. So I'm going to be using my favorite Titebond Quick and Thick, and I'm going to be getting ready to glue those pieces on to the to my board, so those trim pieces. So I'm just going to put some Quick and Thick on here. I'm going to try to do this a little more neatly than usual if I can. I'm not sure how that'll turn out, but I can always try. So I'm going to put my cap first back on my Quick and Thick because it always helps to keep it flowing. And I think I'm going to use a little brush. I had a brush out here and I don't know what I did with it just now. Oh, here it is at the top here. Anyway, I thought what I'll do is brush this along the edges of my piece, some of the glue, and that way I can lay the trim into it. Oftentimes I'll glue the trim itself on the opposite side, but it makes it a little more difficult because then you end up smushing your details on your piece. That being said, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, first of all, but here I'm going to put it in the screen. That being said, I think I need to use enough glue to make sure that it's really going to stick. So, and I'm going to do it kind of one piece at a time because I'm going to have to trim up my piece a little bit to make it fit together, I think. So I'm going to try to make it about as long as my glue, about as long as the piece is. And I'm just putting it on here with a little craft paintbrush that I can rinse out afterwards. As long as you rinse the Quick and Thick before it sets up, then it's certainly water soluble for cleanup. So, but I'm just going to put this on here like this and see how it goes. Okay, let's see if that will work for starters. And I'm going to use my first piece here and I'm just going to very gently pick it up and lay it into the piece. And I'm going to go over a little bit over the top of my piece, just a slight bit, because I want to be able to cut that off if I need to trim it a little bit. Now, the critical thing here is going to be to make it pretty straight along the edge, so that, because I think visually you'll be able to see if it's crooked. So, and I think I thought I had enough glue, but this strip is actually quite long. So I'm going to add a little bit on there just to make sure that I got enough for it, because I didn't feel it adhering. But it is adhering nicely otherwise, so that's really good. So my idea of doing it that way I think is working so far. But again, we want to make sure that we have kind of a nice straight line here visually along the edge of the piece, and we do. I think that looks beautiful. And this is sort of, I don't know if it's like it's just a little vine shaped thing, and it's I don't know if it's like a laurel or what it is, but it's quite a classic little, and I guess it's primitive is what it came from, but it's just a really pretty little trim piece. So I think it's going to be lovely. And then this piece is going to have to fit into that one. So I'm going to grab, okay, I should have done that before, but I'm going to go off camera for a second and grab my little X-Acto blade. Okay, I'm back with my little X-Acto blade. Oops, this is kind of a little precarious here, but I'm going to pull out a blade. This looks like the one that I've been using on clay. Anyway, and then I'm going to figure out how I'm going to make this. I'm going to use one of my broken pieces, I think, for this part. I may as well. But I'm going to figure out how I want this to kind of fit together. And it looks like if I make a little cutout, like a little triangular cutout here, right in the center, it should go in there just fine. So that's what I'm going to do. I hope that you were able to kind of see that. Let's see. If I zero in here, I'm not sure if I can get over into that position so that you can see. But what I did was I made just a little tiny cut here in the middle of my clay piece, just a little V, so that this end, which is also a little V, you can see it on here. Anyway, so that can fit right in. And then you won't even be able to tell much that there's a gap there, that there's a new piece. So that's my idea. realized after I went off screen, there's one more step that I wanted to do. In order for the air dry clay to dry well overnight, it's nice to have either a coat of paint on it while it's still wet or some sort of sealer. So I thought what I would do, this is actually the my decoupage medium here, my Paint Couture decoupage medium, and it's a matte finish. So I thought maybe I'd use that because it also can be used as a top coat. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of that onto my, with a real soft brush here, I'm just going to brush this onto my trim piece, because that way I think that it may not crack so much overnight, and I prefer not to have a lot of cracking to it. Although once again, that cracking can actually sort of enhance the look of it somewhat, because it gives it that vintage look. So you can use that to your advantage in some cases, but I kind of would like to make this consistent because I want it to look almost like a little fall frame around it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a little top coat on it right now, and that way overnight we can see how it works with it. Okay, now I think I'm also going to put one more coat of the Paint Couture matte decoupage medium onto my piece, because I realized if I do decide to do a crackle over the top, it would be good to have that as a base layer. Okay, we are back, and I'm just going to be moving ahead with this piece. What's happened is that it dried, the trim dried nicely. I did fill in just a tiny bit with some, I used this golden molding paste to fill in just a little bit where there was some cracking, but I think it'll be pretty good as far as once it's covered with some paint and so forth. So meanwhile, what I want to do now is go ahead and try out this product, and that will be the Crackle. It's Paint Couture Crackle. It's a two-step crackle, and it is used, as it says here, to create an aged and worn look, and that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish here with this piece over my decoupage paper. And of course, I've sealed it a couple times with the matte decoupage medium. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that, and it comes, like I said, in two steps. So I'm going to put on the Crackle step 1 first and go from there. I need to roll up my sleeves a bit here so that I don't get into the crackle. So I'm going to do that, and then just go ahead with that. And I'm just going to use a very smooth brush for this. And it looks, the Crackle step 1 looks a little whitish, but actually it'll be clear when it goes on. At first, when I looked at it, I thought, oh, I better check it even, but I wiped a little bit on my craft paper, and it did. So the idea here is to go ahead and put it on smoothly. You don't want it, if you want a fine crackle, you don't want it too thick. So I'm going to try to do it with a relatively light touch. The other thing about this is that you don't want to, it says don't overwork it. So we're going to try not to keep coming back over it. I think that's the idea. Most of the Crackle mediums that I've used, they always say that, do not overwork. So but this is the first time I've tried this one. So we're going to go ahead and try it out together. Just going to put some on here and try to evenly cover. One thing I do find with Crackle is sometimes because it is clear, it's sometimes a little hard to tell about your coverage. And I've sort of missed a few spots sometimes with it before, so I'm trying really hard to do this methodically so that I don't miss a spot here. So I'm going to get it in the corners, but I don't want it to be puddling either. So I'm just going to go ahead and coat my whole piece here. Okay, I've got my piece completely covered with Crackle Step 1. And so now what I think I'm going to do is it needs to sit and get kind of tacky is what it says in the instructions. And it needs to sit for about a half hour is what they said. So meanwhile, while I have a little break here from that, I think what I'm going to do is put some paint on my frame, okay, on my little frame that I made with my mold. And I'm using the Paint Couture mineral paints, and these are those little 2-ounce jars that I got, and I do have these now in stock. I'm going to be putting them on the website tonight. I just got the shipment in, so I'm pretty excited about that, and I've got them in all the colors. I think there's 72 different colors of them, so that's really very cool. So I was trying to toy between whether I should do kind of a fall color, so this Tuscan Sun, or whether I should use this color. And I think I am thinking that it should be probably a brown undercoat. I'm going to do some gold antique paste over it as well, I think. And so I'm going to use this color. It's called Pine Cone of the Paint Couture mineral paint. So I'm going to paint that on, and I'm just going to use a small brush to be able to do that, a little paint brush. And I'm just going to use this little brush, I think, to paint it onto my trim pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, this is the undercoat for the trim. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some of this on, and it should be interesting because it's got lots and lots of texture to it. So I'm going to be covering quite a bit here, but I'm just going to go at it. We've got, what I did was I painted this trim in the Paint Couture, the Pine Cone color for right now. And then I decided to paint the edges too of the piece. So I painted those in the same color, because then when I put on the antiquing paste, I think it'll look nice on both sides. It makes it look more of almost a frame effect around the whole piece. Also, during that time, my Crackle Step 1 was setting up, and it's nice and just slightly tacky now. And so I think that we are ready to proceed ahead with Crackle Step 2. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to open this up. I think it's a little sticky, this one. So I probably need to use my 5-in-1 tool a little bit on it. So I'm going to do that just to get it started. Yep. I'm going to give it a little bit of a shake. I don't think you're supposed to shake this too much because you want to avoid bubbles, but I'm going to just rotate it a bit. So I'm going to do that. And there we go. There's my Crackle Step 2. And I'm going to use the same sort of brush that I use, which is just a, if I can get it out of the pack, which is just a relatively inexpensive synthetic brush that I got from Amazon, but they're really nice and soft and they do well with these types of projects. So I'm going to use that. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and put a coat right over the top of this coat. Nice coat of the Crackle Step 2. And again, not overworking it because I can tell that it'll get globby if you overwork it. And we definitely don't want that. The other thing that can happen if you overwork it, I think, with Crackle usually is that it kind of pulls away from the piece and doesn't cover as well. So again, you want to make sure that every area is covered. And there I see a little, almost a holiday. You kind of have to look in the light to see the holidays. I don't like that because it's almost, once you put one bit on there, it's almost impossible to get it to adhere. So it's really tricky that way. But I'm going to start this little project now, and I'm actually waiting for my Crackle to dry on my other project, but I cleaned this up a little bit. This is a little milk can that I got years and years and years ago, and I think it was at Michael's. They may have the same thing now, I don't know, but anyway, it was kind of dusty and funky from being outside for years, and but it held up pretty well. It's got a little bit of rust on it, which doesn't bother me a bit, but I thought what I would do with this now at this point is give it a little paint job. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to start out and use some of my tried and true, my Amy Howard at Home. It's again, Porch Swing is the color, and I'm in love with this color. I keep enjoying using it. So I'm going to go ahead and just with, I think I'll use a chip brush on it. I'm just going to go ahead and start painting this piece up and get it ready. And I'm going to plan on either, I can't decide if I want to use a stamp on it, some stamps from the new collection, or a transfer. I just haven't decided yet, but I'm going to go ahead and get it painted up and ready for some, I'd like to do a little fall decor with this one still, because I'm just kind of finishing up my fall, kind of my neutrals, and then I'm going to be actually moving probably next week onto the holiday things more, as far as, well, I mean, fall is the holiday as far as the Thanksgiving and so forth, but I think I'm going to probably start moving right into Christmas. So meanwhile, I'm going to paint this little milk can, and just going to paint this thing up. Okay, I've got my milk can pretty well painted, and looks pretty good. The coverage, I did a couple coats on it, so that was what it took. And I'm just going to roll up a couple of these little blue shop cloths that I have in order to stabilize it while I'm doing my stamping, because that's what I've decided to go ahead with, is putting a stamp on here. And this is going to be from the Iron Orchid Designs, the Autumn Blessings, and it's this wonderful group of fall type images. And I think I'm going to use this turkey. I think it might be the hen, but I'm not sure. Well, maybe. Yeah, I think it might be, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to use this one. And then I might put in a couple of these little florals around it. I'm going to try this first and see how it works. Go ahead and do it in this sepia color. And I like that a lot for the fall tones. Again, I'm going to try to make sure that I have it as centered as possible between my between the handles of the little milk can. And right here looks like it's about the right spot. So I'm going to actually move as far as the center. So I'm actually going to put a little dot there, just a dot that I can see with a pencil, something that's very small, and I can just rub right off of there. And I've already lightly burnished these stamps with my with my fine grade sandpaper. And I'm just going to use my stamp this way. I'm going to actually put it on with my hands instead of using the thin mount on it, because we are on a curved surface. So I'm going to just look at how I'm going to position it, and I'll be just setting it right down here and then pushing it down like that. So I'm just practicing right now to see how this is going to work. So now I'm going to ink up my stamp and make sure it's got plenty of ink on it, because I don't want to have to repeat this once I get it on there. I'd prefer that we get a nice imprint, a nice detailed imprint the first time. So I'm going to make sure that I cover my stamp really well with ink, especially in the center of the stamp, because sometimes for some reason that's the area that doesn't pick up as easily when you're using these. So we've got plenty of ink, it looks like. And now the most important thing here is going to be to commit once I set it down. So here we go. It's wiggled just a little bit, but hopefully not too much, in order to make a good detailed imprint. And make sure that I don't move it at all, and that I make sure that it's all actually adhering to it, that it's got plenty of, and just put it equal pressure to the whole stamp. And then I'm going to go ahead and take it off of there, and there we go. So there's my imprint on it, and I think it turned out quite well, actually. It's a little thick. I could have gone for a little less ink probably on it, and a little would have gotten a little more detail, but I think it's a good start to it, and I can always distress it a little bit too. And that's why I use the Amy Howard at Home, the chalk paint for it, because I thought I might want to do some distressing, and I think I probably will on it. Now let's see if I can do this little flower print. I'm just going to go for it and see if I can do that on there too. Again, make sure that it's well inked. And of course now I've got so much ink on my turkey that if I don't put kind of an equal look on the flower swag, it might not turn out so well. So I'm going to go ahead and ink it up pretty well here. Okay. This is a little tricky here. Oh, I smudged it a little bit too. And we'll see how this turns out. I may have some challenge here on this one. Yeah, it's a little blobby. But let's see, I'm going to carry on, pretend that never happened, because again, I think I may put some distressing on this too. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. That's the nice thing about these, is that we have these little, the equal, or symmetrical, excuse me, not equal, but symmetrical stamps that we can use in the sets. So that's what I'm going to use here. Try to get it as symmetrical as I can, kind of. And again, this tends to slip a little bit because it's such a long one. It's a little challenging to stamp with. Let's see how I did with this one. Oh, it's kind of way off. But it's kind of equal to the other side, so I'm not too concerned about it at this point. I'm just going to, first of all, let that dry nicely, and then we'll see what happens with a little distressing. And I'm also going to use some wax on this, so we'll see how this goes. Okay. use a little bit of distressing on this now, and I'm just using this little sponge sandpaper, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a distressed look to it with the sandpaper first. And that's kind of nice. It takes off a little bit of that. It's kind of an orangey, the sepia is kind of an orangey tone, and it's a little bold, so I think I like more of almost a watercolor look to it. So I'm going to keep working on this a bit. Take a little of that off. And it gives me the idea of my turkey, but it kind of looks like it's aged a bit, I think. Kind of a light imprint of it. Okay. And then I'm going to also burnish in my ridges on my, give a little distressing to this. I might need a heavier sandpaper for this a little bit. A little distressing to my milk can here. Waxing, I'm going to use a couple different types of wax. It's going to be the Amy Howard at Home clear wax that I do have it in stock here at Secret Garden Mercantile. And I'm just going to use my puck here of the wax and just push my little chip brush into it. And you can use a fancier waxing brush if you prefer. And then what I do is I offload it onto my craft paper too. So I'm going to offload it, and then I'm going to go ahead and just lightly wax over my piece, okay? And, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of wax, and it's better not to get it on too thick. So that's what I'm trying to do by the offloading. So I'm just going to go ahead and wax it all over the piece. That's the first step here. And I've got also my dark antique wax, and that's going to be my second step. But the first step is to put on the clear wax. That's the first one that we use, because otherwise you can overdo it. You can always rub back the dark wax a little bit if you get too much. If you've done the clear wax underneath it, you can kind of rub some of it off, but you can't do that if you don't put on the clear wax. So I'm going to go inside this round too, get all the wax, and a little wax in there too. So, okay, I'm just going to let that sit for a few minutes. I'm just going to let that sit for a few minutes, and then I'll go down a little bit, and then put on my dark wax. Okay, I'm just going to give this a little bit of a buff with my shop cloth here. And just a light buff to the clear wax. Nothing too much. I don't want to bring out a shine to it really. I just want to buff it just a little bit. Again, this will give it some resistance to the dark wax, which is what I want. Okay, so there's that. I think it's pretty good. You feel it. It's got a nice kind of almost a matte finish at this point. So, and then I'm just going to take my dark antique wax, and it is really dark. So you have to understand that this is a little bit, goes a long ways on this piece. And the other thing I'm going to get to have on hand is a wet wipe in order to wipe it back just a little bit when I start putting it on. Okay, so now I'm going to just oops, I forgot to offload. Again, I'm going to offload onto my craft paper. Sorry, I can never talk and work at the same time, which makes it really tough for you guys, I'm sure, to hear me. But anyway, okay, so I'm just putting a bit on here. I'm going to go ahead and put some all over, and then I can always rub some back. I'm going to just burnish this up a little more like I did before, and just kind of take back a little bit of that dark wax, but leaving it enough that it still looks pretty much like that vintage look that I'm going for. That, and it's really kind of a nice fall look too. On my little milk can. Once I put some fall florals, I have some hydrangeas that I actually they dried naturally on my hydrangea, on one of my hydrangea bushes, and I harvested them, and they're just that nice neutral color. So that's what I'm kind of planning on putting in here. So I wanted this, thought this would be a good little pot to put them in, because it should be the perfect size. They're not real tall. So I'm going to burnish this just a little more to get it, to try to get it to have a bit of a sheen to it. I don't know if you can see that, but the sheen is kind of coming out on it. And I like that over the chalk paint. It really gives it a nice look to it. A little more finished look. You can see that, but it does have a little bit of a sheen to it now. So I think it's really actually quite lovely. And I think I'm just going to leave well enough alone on this one. And I think it'll go well with my background decor that I'm making. And I think it should be good. All right. Well, I will style it in a picture for you, and so you can see what it turns out looking like. Okay, I'm back, and I'm not sure how well you can see all of the small, they're very fine crackles that have occurred here. And I let it sit for a couple hours, so I'm going to put us on up close here and see if you can see a little better. There's a lot of small crackles all through this now, very fine crackles. You can see some of the brush strokes also, but there's a lot of crackle. I'm not sure how well you can get a view. Oh, there you go. I think that'll help get you a view of it right there on the white pumpkin, because it reflects on it. But those will show up even more once we put the wax on it. So I'm going to go ahead now and zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to do first the wax around the edges around my piece, and see how that goes. And I think I'm going to use for that, we have the umbre here, and that's what I'm going to use for over the cracks. But I think I'm going to be using this is called bitumen, and then we have the antique gold. And they, honestly, they look almost the same to me. They're both a Paint Art product. But I think I'm going to probably just use the antique gold on here. I've used that in the past, and it really seems to work well. So I'm just going to go ahead and start painting that onto my little frame here first with my paintbrush. That's how I'm going to approach this. And I might have to buff it a little bit with my fingers, but I think I'll just paint it on here. And the nice thing is that because I did the coat of the pine cone colored metallic, or excuse me, not metallic, but the mineral paint underneath it, then I don't have to worry about making sure that it's absolutely covered. So I'm just going to try to highlight this with my antique gold Paint Art metallic antique paste, excuse me, which is what the product is. And you can kind of see it really gives it a nice glow. So I'm just going to go all the way around here and paint this on. got it on here, and then I'm just going to give it just a slight buff with my shop rag, clean shop rag, just to give it just a little bit of, so that we can see that beautiful gold color kind of come out more. So it really does, it's kind of like the rub and buff in that way, that it just makes it more vivid sometimes when you do that a little bit. So there you go. Now the next step is going to be to actually apply the Umbra, which is also an antique paste, and this is going to go over this piece. Now, if you have an area that you feel is just too heavy with the crackle, then right away you can just use and kind of dab away at it a little bit with your wet wipe to get it to even out a bit, because it can be it can get a little heavy sometimes on here, and I don't like that. And the other thing is to use some clear wax to actually kind of tamp it back a little bit. So yeah, you can really see those crackles now. So I'm just gonna, and it's just, there's nothing like this, the look of that for your vintage pieces. And it appears to me, except for the parts where I didn't get the coverage very well with my brush and it's a little uneven, it appears to me that this crackle worked really well, this two-part Paint Couture Crackle. So I'm pretty pleased with that. Now this is where I didn't get a good brush area, so I'm just going to wipe that back a little bit, because I think I don't want to see that streakiness in there so much. So I'm just going to keep dabbing away and rubbing away at this. And where I don't want it so heavy, I can, rub it back a little bit. Say that we're pretty well done with our piece. I'm just buffing this a little bit up again to see, it gets kind of a nice sheen to it. The crackles give it kind of a gloss finish, which is really lovely. And then we have our beautiful frame around the edges, and I love that. So I think we've done a really good job. I believe I have like one piece left of this particular type of decoupage paper in stock, but I think I have another one that's very similar too that I'll put on there, and I'll try to get that on there tonight for you, because, and then we have some of the smaller ones of the same type, but in terms of this large one, the A3 paper, I think that is getting close to the end. I've got more on order, so hopefully I'll be getting those shortly. I did it with a pre-order, so I don't know. But I'm trying to get it from the supplier, so hopefully I'll be getting that soon. And yeah, and then we'll be able to provide you with even more of them. But in the meantime, here's how it turned out, and I think, it's definitely a credible job. I think it turned out quite lovely for our fall decor. And thank you very much for being here with me. I really appreciate it, and you can go to secretgardenmercantile.com for all of your crafting needs, your IOD. I'm a full IOD, complete IOD stockist, and find all kinds of creative possibilities there as well. And thanks again for joining us. All right, bye now.